Hello and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Sav Jonesa. When the national event for Truth and Reconciliation wrapped up in Ottawa on Monday, many survivors began heading home. But as APTN's Annette Francis tells us, members of the Survivors Secretariat stayed a little longer to hold a small rally. It followed a new report released earlier the same day by the Survivors Secretariat, which represents survivors from the Mohawk Institute.
Late Monday afternoon, a small group from Six Nations gathered on Parliament Hill near the Eternal Flame. Secretariat lead Laura Arndt wasted no time asking for support.
Tell your MPs, tell your communities that we've had enough. Indian residential school survivors have been fighting for their lifetime. They shouldn't have to be fighting this late in the game to have the truth told.
According to Arndt, this year's federal budget reduced funding so that there is no long-term support for the search for unmarked graves. They're seeking long-term funding for investigations into the missing children and unmarked graves. APTN News asked Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Anna-Desangri about Arndt's comments. He said the federal government reinstalled a funding cap back up to $3 million after it had been reduced to $500,000 earlier this year.
Having heard from many survivor groups, I instructed our department to lift the cap and essentially come back to the old numbers.
However, in a press conference earlier the same day, Arndt called the minister's words a shell game. She insisted funding has dropped from over $216 million for community agreements to $91 million over the next 2 years, saying long-term funding is lacking.
How do you go from $216.5 million to 91 and say it's not a cut? And while people will say it was never a line item promise, what we would say is if this wasn't going to continue, why did you wait until 9 months into the funding year to tell people that the funding level was being reduced?
Chloe Stevens says having to continue fighting the federal government is appalling.
I think it's tragic. I think that that's not what we need right now, and I think we're going through a lot of struggles where people have went through a lot of pain, our survivors and our elders, that, you know, we need this to heal, and taking it away and just limiting the resources is awful. Where there's still a long road ahead, you know, and it's not just for the publicity, it's for people's hearts to heal.
Alison Seymour came from Akwesasne to show her support. She says youth need to stand up for the survivors.
Us young people need to act because time, as they say, heals most wounds. It's not going to heal this wound. The elders don't have much time left, and it's crucial to bring back the children who unfortunately did not come back from residential schools.
Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Now to Vancouver, where numerous events were held to honor the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. APTN's Tina House has this story.
Close to 1,000 people gathered at Grandview Park in East Vancouver to honor survivors of residential schools and to remember those that didn't come home. Many here are intergenerational survivors that also suffered through traumas of the past, but today is meant to help heal those wounds and celebrate the strength and resiliency of Indigenous people and the next generation coming. Susanna Maya organized the event and proudly dances with her nation to honor this day.
I just want to say, with great gratitude and respect, I thank our ancestors, our survivors, and those who didn't make it home for, their strength. And, my mother, she's a residential school survivor. I'm from the Guasla and Nakwatao Nation, and I thank my ancestors for getting me here and all of us here.
Wanda Christensen is from Bella Bella, BC. She spent 9 years in the Alberni residential school.
I'm one of many survivors who does not remember their existence in residential school. I was so young when taken away at the age of 6 going on 7. It may be hard for some to understand, But growing up, I had no idea about who I was or where I came from. My life was regimented by the supervisors and the ring of a bell at the beginning, throughout, and the ending of each day. The supervisors were my caretakers, therefore I dissociated due to the sexual abuse by a supervisor.
For Gary Peterson, who is from Alert Bay, BC, he says it's time now for the truth to come out for survivors like Wanda.
The rest of the country and the world is finally seeing and hearing our story that needs to be heard, that is a part of Canadian history. And we're not a part of Canada's history. Canada is part of our history. We've been here for thousands of years, living in harmony with the land. But the songs and dances go back thousands of years, and my culture is what made me who I am to this day.
I thank all the allies and the support in the community for being here on such a day that, resonates with so many of us as intergenerational survivors as well. And I thank all the people across the nation who are supporting Truth and Reconciliation Day as well.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The new national holiday for Truth and Reconciliation was honored across the North on Monday. In Whitehorse, people gathered to reflect on the legacy of residential schools. Our reporter Sarah Connors was there.
Hundreds marched in downtown Whitehorse Monday to remember the children who never made it home. The crowd gathered at the Kwanlin Dunn Cultural Center, where a ceremony took place to honor survivors and their families. For many, September 30th is a day to honor truth and build a path forward towards reconciliation.
Can't make it just one day, and we'll march and we'll sing and we'll support. It's got to be every day. We have to live intentionally. We have to live so this never ever happens again.
Little Salmon Carmack's First Nation member Joseph O'Brien says the legacy of residential school continues to impact survivors and their families.
We can change things like what happened in the past, but we can't. But we can make a better future. In front of us. That's our future.
He says while the pain of residential school can never be forgotten, there's hope and healing for the next generation. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
It's great to see so many people coming out to support residential school survivors and the children who never made it home. Coming up, we have a story on the new National Indigenous Residential School Museum. But first, we need to take a quick break. Stick around. Welcome back. A special unveiling took place on Monday at the Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. The ceremony marked the installation of an 18-foot residential school memorial monument. APTN's Annette Francis got a sneak peek of the work last week and sat down to talk with the artist.
This monument is a work of master carver Stanley Hunt.
I wanted people to be able to come and be able to physically touch the monument, physically hold it and feel that what it's meant to do is feel the spirits of our children.
It's a dedication to all the children who didn't make it home from residential schools. The inspiration came while working with friend and fellow carver Ray Dickey after they heard the news of the 215 unmarked graves found at the former Kamloops Indian residential school.
After talking, Ray just said, could we do something for the children? He was asking me as an artist, could I think of something like, how do you honor or something like what happened? So I had lots of time to think about it, and I said, yes I can. But it's going to take a year or so.
It did take a year, and this is the design he came up with.
So in our culture, the creator is the raven, and he's also the trickster. But if you look closely at this raven, he's cradling the seed of life in his mouth, in his beak. And the way he's looking at this monument, he's looking straight down the center of the monument. And what we see upside down, the raven sees it right side up. And he's going to help us understand this and help us find these children and help them bring their spirits home is what I'm hoping happens. It's painted black, white, it's blackwashed because of the dark history that it's marking. There were some very bad decisions made back then. But then it's painted orange for our Every Child Matters movement that's happening.
After carefully being loaded onto a truck, Hunt says it took 2 months to bring the memorial from Prince Rupert to Gatineau. When he saw it standing for the first time, he was emotional.
I'm really honored for them to have taken it this far and to give it this beautiful space that we're in. And it starts its work after Monday, when the public's going to be able to come in and see it.
The inauguration was Monday evening on National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Gatineau, Quebec.
Next year will mark 50 years since the Portage La Prairie Residential School in southern Manitoba closed its doors. Now, as the home of the National Indigenous Residential School Museum, it's been transformed from a place of hurt to a place of healing. Reporter Sierra Beddens took a tour of the museum with the executive director and residential school survivor, Lorraine Daniels.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Daniels. I'm the Executive Director of the National Residential School Museum of Canada. We are located on the Kishkimakwa urban site of Long Plain First Nation. It was called the Portage La Prairie Indian Residential School, and now it's a place where we can come and heal. It operated from 1915 to 1975, and next year it will be 50 years since it closed. The vision of having a museum was through the visionaries of Ernie Daniels. He was a former chief, and former chief Dennis Meaches. In the early 2000s, the vision was incorporated, and they had a BCR designating this as a historic site of significance. So in 2020, it became a National Historic Site. I was 7 years old when I went to Brandon, my first residential school, and I was just learning about the medicines when I got taken away. I'm still learning about the culture that I lost, and being in this position as a director is helping me and teaching me about the culture. First get into the residential school. You're stripped of your clothes, your identity as an Indigenous child. They delouse us with DDT, which is a banned pesticide. I remember how chalky and gritty it was. Some of them had numbers. Some of the schools, we just had initials. On a Sunday, I had to get up at 6 in the morning for early morning church, and then the regular church at noon, and then you would have the benediction in the evening. So this picture is about how the kids were abused severely, mentally, emotionally, physically, and just constantly, such harsh discipline that they could not enjoy being children. This is an actual bed that came from Bertle. So everybody shared dorm, there was no privacy. These are replicas of straps. So there's different sizes of straps for different age groups. So the trauma of touch, you lost your language, your culture, your Indigenous spirituality, and your loss of your family unit. This is to honor the resident school survivors that were part of the singing glee club here. I didn't go to this school, but I was already placed in a private home. And I came here, I auditioned for the glee club because I wanted to go to Japan. So I was able to get in on the glee club. So there was 30 of us that went to Japan, and so if you look at the picture there, that's the group that went. That's me here with the little braids, the long braids. When we heard about the 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops, we had a little ceremony to honor them. So there's 215 feathers, and the jingles represent healing. The orange represents all the survivors, and the blue represents the children that never came home. So that's the wreath to honor the children. It's a difficult truth to tell, but on Reconciliation Day, that's when we all come together and work together. The barriers are down. I really wanted to make it a family event because at one time we were not allowed to be children. Now it's open. We can do whatever we want on this ground because Long Plain owns the building, and it's our choice of how we want to celebrate life now.
Thanks for that story, Sierra. We need to step aside for a few minutes, but we'll be right back with a sneak peek at tonight's season premiere of Face to Face. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Jesse from the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation and Chris McCormick from Batchewana First Nation remember the children as they come together in the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory. Thanks, Jesse. Keep your NDTR photos coming all week by sending them to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. It will be 11 in rain in St. John's, 17 in rain in Charlottetown, 14 in sun in Cartwright, 15 in sun in Nain. Montreal will be 18 in rainy and 19 in some cloud in Quebec City. Toronto's 19 and 18 in London. Timmins is 14 in rain and 16 in Wawa. It'll be 5 in Churchill and 9 in God's Lake and Norway House. Winnipeg will be 18 and Princess Harbour will be 12. Saskatoon's 11 in rain, same with Yorkton. Regina will be 13. Stony Rapids is 6 and Buffalo Narrows is 5. Fort McMurray is 5 and 6 in Peace River. It'll be 13 and some cloud in Lethbridge, 11 in Edmonton and Red Deer, 19 in Kamloops and 15 in Campbell River and Vancouver, 11 in Prince George and Smithers, 5 in Fort Nelson, 7 and some sun in Mayo, 2 and lots of sun in Old Crow. It will be 5 in Yellowknife, 8 in Norman Wells. Sax Harbor will be -1 and +1 in Colville Lake. 7 in Chesterfield, 4 in Well Cove. Iqaluit will be 7 and -5 in Resolute. Native Nations is a program that takes youth from around the world to experience unique cultures and see incredible adventures through Indigenous tourism. They recently wrapped up their tour in Vancouver, and APTN's Tina House was there.
These 32 youth from New Zealand, Australia, and Canada have just completed an epic journey that took them to all 3 countries in 35 days. They were immersed into culture, tradition, and history. Through a program called Native Nations, they got to see places that most will never get to see and experience unique adventures through Indigenous tourism companies. Tyler Fern Toy Toy is 16 years old and she's from New Zealand.
It's been a wonderful experience to be able to go to other countries. Like, I never thought I'd be able to come to Canada. Just life-changing.
Native Nations was founded by Nadine Toy Toy. It all happened last year when she collaborated with other tourism operators at the World Indigenous Tourism Summit in Australia. That's when the program began.
I've been in the tourism industry for decades, and my husband and I own our own Indigenous cultural tourism experience in New Zealand, and for the last 11 years we've been harnessing tourism for good to give back to our community, specifically the youth in our community. One of my aspirations was always to take our kids on a plane overseas. The reality is a lot of our Indigenous youth from remote communities never get the chance to travel the world.
Native Nations is currently shooting a documentary and just released this trailer.
What are we going to do? Change the world!
This journey alongside my whānau has been about tracing Indigenous footsteps. It means taking a leap forward into the footsteps of our ancestors by reviving the cultural aspects we once started in. It means uniting our nations into one, the way it should be.
It's about using tourism as a vehicle to drive change within our communities.
Tim Masso is 21 years old from Clayquot on Vancouver Island. He says it's been an incredible opportunity.
For me, youth are our future. They're what is going to really make change in this world. And being here on this trip with all these amazing youth, to me, it's just been an honor. You know, every single one has gifts that are just amazing. And so being able to connect with them, being able to call them friends and family is a huge takeaway from this trip.
Paula Amos is with Indigenous Tourism BC.
The youth, I've watched them grow over these days through 10 days in Australia, 10 days in New Zealand, and 10 days here where we've hosted them and been able to share who we are.
We've met people on this trip that are like complete strangers, and now I don't know how we're going to live without them tomorrow because we're splitting up. And I'm like, man, I want to stay here longer. Yeah, but yeah, just push yourself to go on to an exchange like this and do something out of your comfort zone, because you're going to make lifelong memories and learn about cultures you never know about.
And tonight is the final stop on that epic tour, and the youth from New Zealand performed their famous haka. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
This week marks the return of our current affairs shows, APTN Investigates, Nation to Nation, and Face to Face. That kicks off tonight with the season premiere of Face to Face. For the opening episode of season 11, host Dennis Ward left the studio for the streets for his interview with Melissa Robinson. Robinson is the cousin of Morgan Harris, one of the victims of a Winnipeg serial killer. She's also the co-chair of Morgan's Warriors, an outreach group helping some of Winnipeg's most vulnerable.
I still can't believe everything we've had to go through the last couple of years, you know, with fighting every single level of government, begging for them to search a landfill so that, you know, my girls don't have to go to a landfill to pay their respects to their mom, to lay flowers down at Mother's Day, to do any of that. You know, we've all grieved. We've all had many losses since the loss of Morgan. I've lost my own son, and I've had to, you know, continue with everything, you know, so no, it's definitely not fair. Things need to change.
You can catch that season premiere right here in just a few moments. Well, that's all the time we have for your APTN National News this beautiful Tuesday evening. I hope you enjoyed the stories our reporters brought to you today. Please check out our website at aptnnews.ca to find more coverage on the issues that impact our community most. I'm Sav Jonesa, and from all of us here at APTN, thank you so much for joining us.